All right, the Knights have been killing it in the portal of late, and our next guest is closer than anybody I know to what's happening in the portal and recruiting. He's Phillip Dukes. He's an analyst for On3 Sports, also hosts a show for them as well. Dukes, appreciate you hopping in, man. Sorry for the tech difficulties in the live show, but appreciate your flexibility joining us here on this record.
Oh man, no problem, man. It's always a pleasure.
All right, let's start off. Before we recorded, you said to us, "quote You guys are killing it in the portal right now." What do you make of what UCF's been able to accomplish so far in this spring transfer portal?
I think what they did was allow themselves to raise the talent, allow themselves to raise the talent level to be able to be more competitive in the Big 12. When you look at what they were bringing in, they're bringing in a real good mix of 1 year guys with multiple years for development, but they're bringing in guys that are ready to play. I think with the quarterback position, KJ Jefferson was somebody who, when you brought him in the first time, it's like, okay, we got KJ Jefferson. But then in the spring, you go get Jacurri Brown from Miami, who I feel like is a Jefferson clone almost, who may, some people think he may even be a better passer than Jefferson in some aspects. So I think the way that you're building depth on that team down at Orlando is going to be special. And I don't think anybody has had a better portal, especially in the Big 12 than UCF. But I would say UCF spring haul rivals anybody in the nation.
Yeah, and you look at what they've done here recently, especially with the wide receiver group, with Javarius Johnson and Ajayi Hall. So, it's already a strong wide receiver room, and they've actually built some depth there.
Yeah, Ajayi Hall has a great relationship with Jarris McIntyre. I forgot J Mac's actual role off the field, but he's somebody that who Mac had been knowing for years and years and years, and for him to be able to be sort of a reclamation project, you get him you get him as a walk on, which I think is amazing to get that type of talent in that role. Then you add them into a room where guys are ready to play, where you see a guy like Kobe Hudson, who had success with Javon Baker, who transferred in, where there is a blueprint for success in that offense and in that role coming from other places. I think it's a perfect spot for him. And also Javarius Johnson, as they call him, VAR. VAR, who came from Auburn, had a lot of familiarity with a lot of the guys down there. He has a lot of talent, and I think being with more familiar people is going to do wonders for him. And a lot of people call UCF Auburn South with the amount of transfers that have been there. But I just think that sometimes good people like being around good people, and I haven't met a lot of people better than Gus Malzahn.
Right on. And Gus is definitely in the relationship business, and he's built that over a decade-long career as a head coach. Coming from Auburn, I mean, we've also seen this pop. You mentioned Jarris McIntyre from Tampa Catholic, that he has this honeypot of talent down there. But also, getting him in the fold. Also, Tre'Quon Reed. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with him. I know you know how he works, and you were covering the Auburn beat as well.
Yeah, T. Reed is somebody. So me going to Auburn and having relationships with guys from who were in Auburn when I was there. T. Reed was one of the young guns who would hang around. And he had always, even when he was in the league, he was always a guy whose first thing in the morning was gratitude. T. Reed's mom passed away, I think, not too long after high school. And for those that don't know, T. Reed was one of the most highly rated recruits in Louisiana history. He was a consensus 5-star across the board when he came to Auburn. It was a really big deal. Lost his mom. And I think got to Auburn. Things didn't go as he went in as a receiver, ended up a DB. Things didn't go his way, but that resiliency and that gratitude stayed with him. And you see it in every post he makes. You see it every time he talks to the media. You see it when he talks to guys. He looks like a guy who has genuinely got a trip to Disneyland or Disney World. So just from waking up in the morning. And so now that he's down there, he's a guy who he's a relentless worker, tireless, great relationship builder. And I think when you have a guy who was more naturally talented at an offensive position, there is a lot that you get from having to learn technique at such an older age. So when you learn defensive back technique when you're already in the system as a Division I athlete, you pick up nuances that some guys may have forgot or missed out on. But he's going to be so fundamentally sound, I think it's going to help him on the field as well. Especially, he already had a relationship with Addison Williams. Whenever they were in Atlanta, I can say that they had a prior relationship. So I think on the back end, you guys are going to be really, really set up for success, recruiting and on the field.
Love it.
We're talking receivers, Dukes, but one of the names that I think surprised people was Peny Boone decided to come to UCF. Obviously, RJ Harvey already there, well-established, one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the Big 12. What do you make, A, of Peny Boone coming to UCF, and B, what do you know about Peny Boone? There's some talk, obviously, went to Louisville, didn't last the spring. What do you know about him kind of off the field that you think led to his move to UCF?
I just think that was probably UCF was probably the level he should have went to right out of college. Like when UCF, when he came out, UCF was more of a mid-major. I think that would have suited him well. Somebody that you're going to have to show attention to, but we call him an arm-around guy. It's somebody, if you have somebody that can show they care, that can put an arm around him, you're going to get the most out of him. Leaving Toledo, I think that, you look at the numbers that he was able to put up, and like you said, it was surprising that when you have a guy like RJ Harvey already there. But one thing about running backs, once you've shown and you have film and you show that you're able to have jump cut explosion, which is something that all the scouts are looking for now. That's the catchphrase. And you can pass block. It doesn't take 400 carries to prove that you're an NFL back. And I think that's his goal. And I think that having another set of tires back there is really going to help him. And not to mention, you guys got another guy from is it Montgomery?
Montgomery. From Cincinnati.
Yep. You've got another guy who's all about that maction. And so you bring him in and he takes a step up. So now you look at that running back room, which is already a strength. But some people may have thought it may have been a tad top heavy. Now you got quality depth. And so if somebody blows out a tire, it's the next man up. And that's how you win games and potentially can get to the playoffs.
All right. So here's a question I like to always ask those who cover the recruiting trail, with the transfer portal and then, the regular high school recruiting, how much harder do you have to work now in doing this? Is it twice as hard, 3 times as hard?
Man, you know what? It's seasonal. So, transfer portal time, my old lady, she'll be like, my phone will just start going crazy. And she'll be like, what's wrong? Oh, damn, it's portal time again, ain't it? Like, the transfer portal is so crazy. So, I think that's probably where you have to balance yourself the most but I like the fact that transfer portal season ends. That's when the OV season kind of picks up. So as long as it's like transfer portal dead period are like right there together, and then it opens up. So it kind of just slows down a little bit going into OV season, but then it'll pick right back up. And then towards the end of the year, December is crazy with signings and transfer portal. So yeah, you do have to pick it up a little bit, but man, like I say, man, you do. Like I say it all the time. Like the gratitude that I have to be able to do this, right? So it's never a got to do it for me. It's a get to. So it excites me all the time.
Well, that's something that's exciting about you. You have immense rapport with all these kids. We saw your 5-star flex segment that you did with Tony Williams, 4-star 25 commit for us. You're sitting down with these guys. I remember your KJ Bolden interview that no one else had that. You kind of put that to the fold, and that's how you kind of got the attention of On3. What do you kind of enjoy by highlighting these prospects, the entire recruiting process? And, would you ever consider maybe getting outside of media and going in-house and working as a recruiter for a team in the future?
Man, it's funny you said that. So I had an opportunity before I signed with On3. I don't want to say the school, but I definitely was in talks with the school as far as coming in on the administrative side. Just trying to figure out a role that would fit for me. Being from Atlanta, a bit of talent, and so if anybody's listening to my story, like I got kind of popular in Auburn when I was in school from throwing parties. So the people who were throwing parties and the parents that were partying 20 years ago, well, now these are the same parents that are producing these high level athletes. So being able, sometimes I'd be like, hey man, you should have seen your dad when 50 Cent in the club came out. Like that, sometimes that just it kind of builds endearment with these guys, but also understanding I think the biggest thing that I do is I don't ask the same questions usually. It's always about, and when I say the same questions, hey, where are you going to school? It's, hey, where are you from? Talk to us about an adult that's in your life that's made an impact. What is something that you do that nobody expects? Like Tony Williams is a singer. Who would have known that, right?
Yeah.
And and he has a really good relationship with Tarvis Alford, who's another Ohio State commit, who is a huge UCF target, who literally told me on my show, he was like, man, UCF is right there. I just think that building rapport is so much more important because you're not only giving guys who may not have had any media training or opportunity to kind of get some and kind of speak freely, make them feel comfortable. But you're also learning for the next generation. When I say this, I got a 10-year-old son. So if I know what this generation of football players is thinking, the next generation, when I go see him and talk to him, I have more of a cachet to talk to him about, because, you know, the older we get as parents, the less cool we get. So I treat it like a fountain of youth. I love it. And but yeah, I definitely had some thoughts about going front office, but I think the impact that I'm making on a more I guess less structured, because right now I can talk to anybody in the country. Some certain schools just aren't recruiting certain guys. I had a guy on named Noah McHale, and nobody in the world probably would have thought this guy was actually African. He doesn't look like it, very fair skin. His dad is Egyptian, but he gets on and starts talking about his African heritage, and I thought that was so cool. Yeah. Just for him being able to open that up, and they hit me and thank me. So yeah, I just feel like being able to make an impact through. And I feel like being a personable guy or a people person. There aren't a lot of jobs where you can really shine. You know, I mean, all right, you know, I'll talk to y'all all day, but man, I was a warehouse manager. So being a people person in there, when you're telling people, hey man, you got to get back on that machine. I mean, it's not as fun, right? It's like, man, you get on the machine, right? Like that's kind of if nobody's happy at work, right? So I think this kind of suits me better, and I'm just grateful, and I tell God thank you every day.
Excellent.
Well, first, major props to that AI question behind you on the shelf there. That's a pretty rad throwback. But you mentioned quarterbacks earlier. Let's go back there for a second. Obviously, UCF loses Timmy McClain, who ends up going to Arkansas State, but they bring in Jacurri Brown. I don't want you to necessarily crap on any of the quarterbacks, but how do you make in that transition for UCF, going essentially from Timmy McClain to backup to Jacurri Brown as a backup?
I think it just raises the talent level. If you saw what Jacurri Brown was able to do last year, late in the season for Miami, there was a lot of people who were upset that they went and spent the type of money that they did in the NIL collector for Cam Ward instead of putting that money in different places. Maybe they would have been able to keep Najee Kelly if you just went with Jacurri Brown. I mean, I think he played well in the little time that he did have. Freak athlete. I watched him when he was in South Georgia at Valdosta. He has a real live cult following down there in South Georgia. Like, he's a star already. He's played in the bright lights of big time football in South Georgia, where they state contenders every year. I just think, and no slight to McClain, I really think that Arkansas State will probably be a really good spot for him. But when we're talking about Big 12 football, you got to have guys who can perform at the level of talent that not just in your locker room, but across the league. And I think that's just one of the things that created that Gus and UCF was able to create depth, quality depth, where if somebody goes down, you got a guy right now that can go win you a ball game.
And of course, I got a comment about something behind you too, because love the Brave stuff. You can see I got some behind me as well.
Yes,
so when you look at what UCF did in their first year in the Big 12 with the talent level they had, how would you assess their performance their first year?
I thought they did a great job. To be honest, there were some things that they could have done better, as far as like some games where they got up, where they didn't close. But when you think about what it takes to be successful in the trenches, and you look at where they addressed themselves this year in the front seven, like I talked to a guy who ended up not going to UCF, who was going to UCF. I believe he may have committed, but there were just too many guys in front of him. And this kid's a player. So when a Power 5 guy who has production says, hey man, I was going to UCF, but they just got too much in front of me, that lets you know now that where UCF is as far as the talent level. You got to be strong up front, and you get on both sides of the ball. And a lot of people always make a lot about UCF and Gus Malzahn's Achilles heel being up front. But I think they did a lot to address that, especially in the transfer portal. Yes, you got some more senior guys, but this year you got 8 guys on the offensive line that you can get quality snaps from. And I think last year you may have had 6 that to get very quality snaps. So I think that makes a difference when you think about going to war in a conference like the Big 12. And I still keep saying Power 5, Power 4. I'm sorry.
Right. That player you mentioned, what position did he play?
I think UCF was bringing him in as an edge.
Okay.
And but he's previously was a stand-up linebacker.
Right on. I mean, Gus, he's always been an elite recruiter. We're on the come up of, you're always gonna have skill position talent smack dab in Florida, on both sides of the ball. Our defensive line, we got a great guy in John Walker that decided to stay home, hometown hero that he got there. If you see anything, looking at Gus's tenure at Auburn, do you see any echoes of kind of the same things you were mentioning? Sometimes tackles are up front. We're in a strong recruiting point for him. Looks like we're going to have our tandem of the potent backs that he likes to run, that he ran a lot over at Auburn. Do you see him kind of doing the same, or do you think seen him grow a little bit more as well as he's been here?
I think he's grown a tremendous amount, and I think one of the spots that he's grown the most in is assessing quarterbacks. When you look at the offense that they were running at Auburn, they never went with the guy who was best suited for that style of offense. When you think about the quarterback runs and run the quarterback power, which was a staple of his offense. So, like John Rice Plumlee, freak athlete, perfect. When you look at KJ Jefferson, perfect. Jacurri Brown, perfect. The guy who was committed there, who didn't end up there, who's at Boston College, I believe, is Tommy Castellanos.
Yep.
He would have been perfect, right? As far as with his dual threat ability. But when you look at what Auburn was bringing in after Nick Marshall, you never saw the guy. You look at a guy like Jeremy Johnson, who really didn't have the wheels. Jarrett Stidham, who was a transfer from Baylor, was a heck of a ball player. But do you think that he fit in the same way that? He basically was like a Dylan Gabriel clone to me, as far as not being a perfect fit for that offense. And a lot of people made a lot about Dylan Gabriel leaving, but I think that you had to get a guy who really fit the offense, and now you got it in spades. And another thing too is John. I don't think people understand how big that was to keep John Walker home. And then basically in that high school, was that Lakeland?
Osceola.
And that was him. It was the kid who was supposed to go to Oklahoma, I believe.
Derek LeBlanc?
Derek LeBlanc.
LeBlanc came back, yeah. Parachute.
Yep.
We're like a parachute school. Guys can come back. They want to come back home. We got a good landing spot right here.
Yep. Derek LeBlanc. And then there was a corner. Did he end up there too, or did he go to Florida? I think Jakeem Jackson.
Yeah, he went to
Florida.
Florida.
Yeah, he went to Florida. But getting those two up front, that at that level that you guys were at the time that you got them, that was the equivalent of getting a Derek Brown and a Marlon Davidson. And whenever Gus Malzahn has had that tandem, he will go in that defensive coordinator room and say, lean on them. And that's what they did. And I think that those two, as they continue to grow together, and you start to mix more people around them, and the defensive lineman, is that Kenny Ingram?
Yep. Kenny Ingram, Kenny Martin, yeah.
Yeah, Ingram and Martin. Those two right there are two guys. If I would say anything else about Coach Malzahn, his ability to identify young talent and how it relates to other people and mixing it in with veteran leadership. I love the way he puts staffs together, and I think he's just getting better. Cam Martin is a star in the making. I'm not sure how much longer he'll be at UCF, because bigger schools are going to be calling, and they're going to have to pony up because he's a star in the making. Then you got guys like, and I think the move that he pulled was kind of taking some of the responsibility away from Addison so he didn't get caught up. And sometimes when you don't have that perfect year and you're the guy calling it, you can go this way or you can go that way. And once you get a shot, a lot of times they take that role from you. You never get a shot again. I think by being able to take some of that responsibility away, putting them in with a veteran guy like Ted Roof, then meshing them together, I think Addison becomes he becomes a stronger coach in the long run, and it actually helps him. So I think that the development portion of identifying talent and developing it is something I think Gus Malzahn has always been good at, and I think he's gotten even better at UCF.
UCF got two young guys in the secondary, some guys who haven't played a lot, Cedrick Hawkins and Tre'Quon Fegans. What do you know about either of those two, and what do you project their fit to be for UCF?
So Cedric Hawkins was a guy that Auburn was absolutely crazy about. They thought they were going to get him. He ended up at Ohio State. He's a guy that has a lot of multiplicity. I think you can move him around. He's physical enough to come up and run support, but he has enough length and enough speed to be able to play that deep third. I would venture to say that he could play a little bit of that nickel star role or whatever it is. So having a guy who's versatile and not being a one-trick pony is super important. And then Faggins, when you have a guy who's already had snaps, I think it was the most important part of it is his little brother is a monster. And I think that only bodes well to try to help get the little brother there. But as far as Fagins himself, he's like, when you look at some of the depth that you guys lost in the secondary, he's a guy who's already had some experience that you're able to bring in that can help some of the younger guys. When you look at the guys that you guys got from Atlanta, like the kids from Atlanta, CP Beast Peterson and Jacob Gould, and there's one more. You guys got a lot of young depth and they're in that tweener range. So having a guy like Faggins who can kind of teach them more things, I think is going to be really huge, and I think it's a great locker room pickup.
How much does that actually happen, Dukes, where recruiting him gets his brother in terms of Faggins? It feels like a chestnut checkers move for UCF.
Yeah, sometimes it happens, right? And it depends on the family. I think the most important part is having a real need and being able to be competitive in the NIL space. But if you can if you can sell it keeps you in a conversation longer with 5 stars when you may not be in a position to be able to get. You don't have the pull of home like you had with John Walker, who was really highly rated. Tony Williams, who's a 4-star, fairly highly rated. He's still in that Florida area. You don't have that same pull. But when you do have the pull of family, hey, come to the game. You get them on campus more often. Hey, we're going to go see bro. You get those extra visits that the average school is not going to get. And I think if you play it correctly, you've seen multiple times, like Marlon Davis's brother was an Auburn guy. So I think Gus Malzahn ain't no fool at all. So I think, like you said, they may be, and I can't guarantee that it'll work because Faggins does have a long list of suitors, the younger Faggins, Anquan, new boy. But I do think that it could only bode well for UCF.
And what do you make of the number of 4 stars that UCF has recruited this past season? You know, that number has definitely skyrocketed quite a bit. How much of that is Big 12 influenced? How much of that is, just Gus Malzahn being the master recruiter he is?
I think I tell you what, well, Houston ain't doing it, and Cincinnati ain't doing it. So I think, and they're both in the Big 12. So I think it's got to be more so of what Coach Malzahn has been able to sell and the staff that he's put together. And when you look at where the staffs have relationships, you can dip into Tampa because you got a guy like J-Mac who's been there for years. In Atlanta, you got it in Spades and Addison, who was at Westlake High School from the South Side, which is pretty much outside of Gwinnett. I would say rivals is probably the hottest area in Atlanta to recruit. Oh, yeah, and then I forgot the guy who's off the field. Please forgive me, but he came from Gwinnett. He's a stalwart recruiter from Gwinnett who handles that area. So you look who was there before. When T. Will was there, all he would talk about. When I used to talk to T. Will about UCF, he ran down, oh, we got the most. I mean, they got their stats like it's been embedded in them. Like it's like they like somebody sits them in a movie theater and says, you guys learn this stuff because if you don't, you'll lose your job. That's how much they know what UCF has to offer when it comes to alumni under 35. When it comes to the number of social media influencers who've come from UCF, when it comes to the possibility and the ability to grow NIL through having young alumni, like, I mean, it's so much to sell at UCF, and I think you got the right guy to sell it.
Yeah, and especially having a young alumni base, you would think that NIL is something that would hurt us, but now that it's all up front and on the table, we can sell that in tandem with all the resources that we have in Orlando. What do you think of these kids now that are coming out? What are you hearing from these higher 4 or 5 stars? That am I trying to get the biggest bag possible? Am I trying to get developed for the league? Am I trying to maybe go to a smaller school and see what I can produce to maybe get a second check later on? What's kind of like the word, and what do you see this kind of being in 10 years with NIL scape?
I think it's a sliding scale that based on the kid, NIL is going to be here and development and winning is going to be here. And based on the kid, it'll slide up a little or here, but they're not far apart at any other time. Like that at this point, there's a going rate. Like everybody said, the going rate for a quarterback was $1 million in the portal last year. The going it's almost a cost of doing business. You know what it's going to cost to recruit a 5-star. So if there's no need in going to talk to a guy, because who's going to leave $400,000 to $500,000 a year on the table to stay home? Or I'm gonna leave $400,000 to $500,000 a year so I can go get developed. When if you're already a 5-star, 9 times out of 10 you've got the goods already. and there's not a whole lot of difference between the level of coaching that you get on the Power 4 level at this point. And I was talking to a recruit the other day who was saying, well, man, if I go to this school, that coach had 3 NFL players, and I go to this school, this coach had 2. Do you think it's because of what they teaching? You think he just had a better player in that year? And he made a ton of sense. It's like, I can get this wherever I go. Maybe I'm the guy who gives this other coach the third. So I think NIL is still a huge portion of it. I mean, why wouldn't it be, right? I mean,
right.
We go to work every day and try to figure out, nobody saying, hey, man, I love playing Madden all day. I'm going to stay home and play Madden. Like, nah, you got to go get that check. And but in 10 years, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens when the players become employees of the universities. And I think that's going to happen sooner than later. I had a talk with a head coach last year, very prominent head coach in the SEC, and he was just like, they're going to have to do it. He's like, there's no way we could continue to go at this pace. And because look at everything, in order to legally utilize NIL, basically you have to go recruit somebody and guess, hey, man, go talk to the collective. They'll tell you how much you're getting. And you're not supposed to have any contact in it. It's just fundamentally almost dumb, the way they do it. I mean, there has to be a way for the university to be able to directly get to the players and I think that's going to come when they start cutting the players in on some of the television revenue, which I think is going to be game changing. And what I really think is going to happen is it'll just be salaries, and then it'll go back to how it was in the old days where, hey, you got to get a little extra. You get this separate, so it's always going to be a bidding war. It's just I guess it's just the method of bidding.
Different buckets.
Yep, that's it, man.
Give us some insight on KJ Jefferson, if you can. How will he fit in UCF's offense? Obviously, we only saw him in the spring game. We didn't see a ton out of him. Some fans freaked out where his weight was posted at 266. Give us some insight on KJ and how you think he projects in the Gus system.
Man, I think he is perfect for him. Especially when you think about his talents and his skill sets. Gus Malzahn has always been like a 1-2 read type guy. When you look at his offense, like, Gus could tell you where to go with the ball, and that guy's going to be open. Because I always enjoyed the fact that when Gus Malzahn exploits a tendency, there's no one better in the world. I don't know if you guys remember Ric Flair when he used to wrestle, but when Ric Flair wrestled, he would stomp you in the knee. And for the rest of that match, they were, he's working the knee. He's working the knee. He's working the knee. Well, Gus Malzahn has that same temperament when it comes to exploiting something. And I think that if KJ Jefferson gets rolling, he's one of those guys that Gus Malzahn is going to put him in a position where he can't be stopped, in my opinion. I watched KJ Jefferson against Alabama last year, literally carrying defenders. There was no Arkansas's offensive line last year was not good at all. There was no reason for them to be in that game last year except for KJ Jefferson and that defense play out of their minds that game. I saw more of that in KJ, and I saw a lot of bad. I did see some bad throws. I did see some rush throws, but what I saw more than anything, he was never comfortable in that Dan Enos offense. Not one time last year did I see KJ Jefferson comfortable. When you look at what they were able to do under Kendall Browse, him and Rocky Sanders, right? Both of them had the worst years they ever had, and they were both supposed to be they were both preseason all SEC. So or in some form or fashion. So I just think in that Gus, on the Gus bus, I really think that KJ Jefferson could be a dark horse to be Conference Player of the Year.
Are you concerned about 266? Does that bother you at all?
No, I don't, man. Like his body weight and the way his body is structured, and he's a little taller than people think he is. So when you see him, I'm like, I weigh 225. I'm 5'8". I'm like, man, shoot, that boy work out every day. I think he'll be all right. Now, what I do think is this though. If he does, it does bear monitoring to the point when you look at how many times can you carry the ball. Because if Gus gets you and he starts to run that quarterback power and he knows you can't stop it, you become a battering ram. And can you do that in the fourth quarter? And do you have the conditioning? Well, there's a guy on the bench that I know is ready. And so Jacurri Brown, I don't think you have to worry about that at all. So I think if that doesn't, I think that in itself makes the Brown pickup that much more important, because now you got somebody to push a guy in front of him. So if they say, KJ, we want you at 255, okay, well, if I don't drop these 11 pounds, I got a guy right here nipping at my heels that I know is not going to have a problem making the weight. So I think for that reason itself, I don't think, for what KJ Jefferson has on the line, I don't think it'll be a problem.
And hopefully he's not 3 inches shorter than his listed height like Brodie James is. So.
Yeah, that was tough, right? Yeah, that was tough. That was tough.
So it's never too early to talk 2025, right? And
right.
You have UCF as the #1 ranked Big 12 recruiting for 2025. Give us your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that when you look at the positions they're recruiting and being able to get 4 stars this early, you got multiple 4 stars in the defensive backfield, which I think is huge. Wade and Tony Williams told me, you guys watch the show, he's working Wade and Charles every day. They have the same advisors, and I think you guys have a real shot at Wade and Charles. And I just think that it's only going to get better because UCF, you guys aren't just recruiting, or UCF last year, they just didn't recruit good football players. They recruited good people from the Atlanta area. The guys that they got, Walt Claire Flynn.
Yeah.
Walt Claire and his family. Walt Claire is one of the most popular kids in Atlanta. He played football with Aaron Nolan, Jelani Thurman, Josh Horton at Miami. Like, growing up, he was one of the more popular guys. He lended credibility to UCF in the Atlanta area last year just by him going, and because he had a list of schools he could have went to. I heard he's doing really well already too. By getting the right people, not just getting good football players, but getting the right football players, I think that's going to be huge in landing another monster 25 class. And you got to think, right now you guys are #1 ranked. That's over teams like Oklahoma State. Like, the guys, I mean, real fixtures in the Big 12. I mean, and right now, I don't think you guys will be far off of Oklahoma or Texas, even if they were still in the Big 12. So when you recruit at that clip, no matter what the position is, there's something good to be said about what you're doing. And I think that they have the best recruiting staff. I mean, I did a whole breakdown of recruiting in Florida, and UCF is in more ways the one staff relatability. I don't think there's a more relatable staff in the state of Florida, and that's including Florida State, whoever. There's not a more relatable staff there. I think the head coach right now, the only thing that you were, the only hot seat or the hot button that you would think about with Gus Malzahn is if how well he does he go back to Arkansas if Sam Pittman leaves. I mean, that's really it. You got stability. I think he wants to play golf in Florida. He loves golf. I think he wants to chill out down there and get on some Waffle House. You know what I mean? So I think UCF is set up for success in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, he always talks about it just if the right guy got here and didn't think of it as a kind of a stepping stone or a launching pad. And, going back, I mean, he did it in the best division of college football in the SEC West. I mean, Saban's out of there now, so maybe, even if he wants to deal with all that now. But you get the guys here. What does that do if UCF can actually start putting this together on the field and knocking out an 8-4, 9-3 season? You got guys from the Atlanta area like Walt Claire Flynn, Kylan Fox, and some of these guys start kind of talking and like, let's just do the damn thing. How far off do you think that is for us? And what do you hear on the recruiting trail in the Atlanta area and everywhere else you kind of peep into?
Man, I think when you start to think about the guys who are visiting UCF, so one of my dad's favorite sayings, or my favorite sayings of his, is if you keep going to the barbershop, eventually you're gonna get a haircut. So if you keep getting these 4 and these 5-star guys on campus, you're gonna start to land them. And I think like even getting a guy like Malik Archery on campus was huge. Had a great relationship with Trayvon Reed. When you think about new boy Faggins being on campus, you're gonna land some of these guys. And I think the time is now. I think this year you put together these wins, they see the explode. They see the excitement around the bounce house. When you look at what's the name of the tradition where they turn the lights off and they got the cell phones and it looks crazy down there and they play the
Zombie Nation do lights up and lights down too.
Man, good gracious, bro. Like, there's something to really sell at UCF. So I think the time is now, to be honest, because And another thing that Coach Malzahn was really good at, when Auburn was successful, it wasn't always about the 5 stars. It was about the 4 stars that could play. It was about the kids that didn't go to making sure that the kids who didn't go to Alabama didn't go to Clemson. Making sure the kids who didn't go to Florida State didn't go to Florida. Making sure the kids whose dream school was going to Georgia, make sure keeping them out of Clemson. And if you look at Clemson's rise, it's when they start getting the 4 stars out of Georgia. When you look at Walt Claire Flynn, for example, some people may think he's undersized. He's a hell of a football player, right? If you continue to get those fringe 4 stars who say, he's not long, he doesn't fit our profile, but he'll kick anybody, he'll kick that 6'6" guy's tail just because he wants it more. When you start to stack those guys, then the 6'6" guy turns around and looks and says, well, I just got my ass whooped. I might need to go down here. So I think, I'm telling you, man, I think and Alabama too, I think the ties in Alabama that they're building and that Gus already had, but bringing in a guy like T. Reed who was recruiting, whose recruiting profile went deeper than the 25-26 class. You go talk to T. Reed, he'll tell you about a guy who could play in 27 in Alabama. And he also has huge connections in Louisiana. And you just look at that staff, Ingram and Martin and the other Cam Martin from you just look at that staff. You guys are set up really well for success. And I think me personally, I think UCF could win the Big 12 this year.
Well, I'm going to get you out of here in this, but I appreciate your time. So Action Network, Circa Sports has UCF next year over under 7.5 wins. Should I bet my mortgage on the over, Duke? Should I bet my mortgage on over 7.5 for UCF?
I'll go half with you.
Okay, perfect.
I'll go half with you. It's not like when you go down the schedule, it's UCF got too much, man. And I think what they do have, now they got the athletes and they got the depth. The problem last year is once those first after that first 33 got tired, you saw a drop off. You got 33 guys that can go into play. You got your first string, your second string, and then you got 5 or 6 guys who could really play on each side of the ball. Maybe about 32, 33. When you start to get to having 40, 44 guys who can really play, now you're cooking with grease. And I think in that conference, you go look at UCF's roster. You got 50 guys who can play. Now, some of them may be young, but you got 45 to 50 guys who can really play. So when you go look at the rest of the rosters in the Big 12, anybody who came over with y'all already better than to me this year. So yeah, I got UCF at about 9 wins. I think it's one of those Gus Magic years, to be honest.
All right, where can people
I'm sorry, Adam. I had one more question. So you look at how heavily that UCF now recruits Florida, Georgia, the Southeast in general. Would you say the Southeast region is the best for recruiting high schoolers versus other countries of the country?
In my opinion, yeah. And I look at it per capita. Just imagine if, because the biggest competition you're going to have for Florida or Georgia is going to be either Texas or California. If you look at the square footage of both of those states, I mean, if you combine Georgia and Florida alone, nobody would be close when it comes to NFL talent or 4- and 5-star talent. And this ain't pie in the sky. These are facts. When you look at Florida itself, the South Florida area is so populous when it comes to Division I talent. I mean, yeah, I go with the Southeast, and I think it just means a little bit more. No apologies to Texas and California, but I just think as far as you get more chances. But whenever you look at per capita numbers in the NFL, it's always Georgia and Florida.
Dudes, I got one more question. I did a little reading your bio. You're from College Park, right outside of Atlanta. I used to spend every summer in Atlanta, early 2000s, with my cousin, all that. What would you say is the best hip hop group or rap artist out of Atlanta?
You're right behind.
See behind him right there, yeah.
The Pimp and the Poet. Hey, I got this at the Braves game last year,
Love
bro.
That.
So tight, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, but yeah, definitely Outcast, man. Growing up, I actually went to Tri-Cities High School for a year. My mom taught Big Boy, like just being able to watch their ascension from Southern Player Listed Cadillac Music all the way up until they went diamond with the Speaker Box and Love Below on a national level. I think it's funny because when you talk to kids from around here, everybody's got a sense this era of nobody's famous. Like, we'll talk to anybody. Like, you go catch one of them kids from Atlanta, it could be, it don't matter who it is. And I think Outcast is what gives us that sense of pride from seeing somebody from where we're from to be able to go to those heights. Everybody kind of feels like, man, ain't nobody famous. Like, so you see, they try to fight Cam Newton every time they get a chance. They be like, ain't nobody famous. Like, it don't matter, man. And shout out to Cam too, man. My bad, dog. I ain't mean to bring that up, bro.
All right, man. You're doing some great work. Where can people find you? Where can they follow you? Where can they catch your show? Give us your plugs.
Oh man, catch me on Twitter and Instagram at Dukes D Scoop THE Scoop. And man, On3 Recruits page. Tomorrow I'll be on with Andy Staples on On3 YouTube main page. Andy Staples has been a great mentor, so I've been doing this show about once a week. And we got a lot of great talent over at On3. JD Paquel, young up and coming guy who's really good behind the microphone. And then a guy like Josh Newberg, who comes from basically recruiting royalty when you think about his family. So, man, come check us out, and I appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate it, bro. Thank you.
All right, man.